Shadow is a character I've never really talked about on this channel, and there's a reason for that. Everyone talks about Shadow! But after replaying Sonic Adventure 2, I decided that I needed to address something. That's right, Shadow's death. Shadow's death is one of the saddest moments in Sonic games, in my opinion. But the one thing that makes it lose all emotional value is the fact that Shadow returned. It probably was a mistake for Sega to kill a character with such potential in the first place, but it worked. It actually made sense. And to be honest, Shadow used all of his potential in Sonic Adventure 2, and after that, he's pretty much been an empty shell. I'm not saying I hate Shadow or anything, he was one of my favourite characters back when I was an early Sonic fan, but comparing him to his Adventure 2 counterpart is an insult. Let me get one thing straight. Shadow's evil appearance is a red herring. He isn't supposed to be a darker version of Sonic. That was just how he was supposed to look to mislead the player into believing that he was a villain, when in reality, Shadow was just very upset and misguided. This actually followed the trend of Chaos from the first Sonic Adventure game. He originally seems like a villain bent on destruction, but in reality, he was angered by a past event. The only real difference is that Shadow was more of a character than a monster, and he helped in the final battle against the monster which was the prototype version of himself. Shadow was on his own side, and throughout the whole game he was determined to avenge Maria, his friend who was murdered aboard the Ark. He's not a monster like the prototype Ultimate Lifeform, he has intelligence and, more importantly, emotions. He was very close to Maria, and clearly he misses her. And he's angry that humanity killed her and everyone else he knew aboard the Ark, just because they thought he was a threat, when really, he had done no harm to anyone, and only started acting violently when he was released by Eggman. This violent nature of his is something which even Sega have misunderstood now. Shadow was not a violent person. He's strong, but not aggressive. Nowadays, Shadow has been portrayed as a character who enjoys doing things the violent way, but that's the opposite of what he was supposed to be. He was never violent. That's the whole point. We're supposed to see him as violent because we're supposed to be like the other humans who feared him originally, and by the end of the game we discover that Shadow really wasn't a bad person. Now then, on to the death itself. Shadow died for the people of Earth. After what Amy said to him in the Ark's control room, he remembered his true promise to Maria and was visibly shown to cry. Amy reminded him of Maria, and she also said something to him which he no doubt understood. The people of Earth all fought over trivial things, but they all deserved a chance to be happy. Shadow, the hedgehog who was on nobody's side, wasn't alone because he was a lone villain, but because he was supposed to be everybody's hero. He didn't have a side because everyone, in his eyes, deserved a chance, and that's why he let himself die. He saved the planet. He gave everyone that chance. Now? Shadow no longer cares about anyone or anything. He is merciless. He refuses to even be nice to anybody. Now, people will say that this is because of what happened with Maria, and he doesn't want to get close to anyone when he knows he's going to lose them. But honestly, that's a major step back in his character. His reaction to Maria dying was to take out his anger on the world, but he eventually decided that such an action was selfish, and he put all of his past behind him in those final moments of the game. He wanted the colony to crash into Earth so that everyone could die. He wanted to obey his creator, who had been executed. He wanted to follow Gerald's own revenge plan so that he could avenge Maria's murder. But right at the end of the game, after Amy spoke to him, he realised that it just wasn't worth it. After all of his own effort and Gerald's effort, he put a stop to the revenge plan. He put his past behind him. And then came the whole amnesia fiasco, which took place in Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog. I get that in Shadow the Hedgehog he was also supposed to put his past behind him, but it didn't feel the same. Shadow felt more closed off in that game. while in Sonic Adventure 2, he actually opened up. He wasn't afraid to cry in front of Amy, and he wasn't afraid to admit that he was going to save the planet because he had learned to care about everyone. But in Shadow the Hedgehog, he became some edgy lone wolf who would never make friends ever again. In reality, the end of Shadow the Hedgehog was just Sega's way of saying we're gonna just get rid of the whole Ark and Maria thing so that Shadow can have other traits and do new things as a character, which is fine. But not when those traits and story plots regress the character's development. Now, I will say that this process of erasing Shadow's traumatic past actually did work for a very brief moment, and that was in Sonic 06. Shadow started working for GUN, the company which he once saw as his enemies, and this showed that he really had moved on and had forgiven those who hurt him. Some people thought that this wasn't right for Shadow, but seeing that he died for absolutely everyone on Earth back in Sonic Adventure 2, it really doesn't surprise me that he would work for GUN. Sonic 06 definitely did a good job with Shadow's character. Sega still showed that he was seen as a dangerous weapon by humanity, which is something Mephiles tried to exploit by showing Shadow what his future looked like. But Shadow showed that it wasn't going to work on him. He knew that the world saw him as a threat, but he had let go of his hatred. The real important task at hand was to stop Mephiles from destroying the world he was sworn to protect. This development really did show that Shadow had become a selfless individual who had moved on from his past, but was still very aware of it. I guess Shadow was still sort of like this in the Sonic Rivals games too. This was where Sega started to really turn him into a bit of an asshole, but he was still shown to be nice. I think my main memory of what he was like in those games was just how he acted around Metal Sonic in Sonic Rivals 2. He actually seemed to care about him. He was worried about him destroying himself, and despite Metal only serving as a communicator for Eggman, Shadow could see that he had his own awareness and spoke to him like he would speak to Omega, another close friend of his. But now the real Shadow is gone. And no, I'm not referring to the android theory. I'm referring to the fact that Shadow is really gone. He's not the same character anymore. Sure, he's cool, but I honestly don't like how much he's been set back. Take characters like Sonic, for example. Sonic has regressed quite a bit too, but he didn't go on the same emotional development journey which Shadow did, so seeing him reduced to an obnoxious jokester isn't as insulting compared to Edgelord Shadow, who went from being humanity's saviour to just being Black Sonic with an angsty attitude. Let's look at things this way. Imagine if Gamma was brought back. Yes, Gamma, the robot you played as in the first Sonic Adventure game. His development was one fans would love to see for characters like Metal Sonic, but this development comes with a price. Every time a robot in the Sonic universe has developed in such a way, they have died. Hyper Metal Sonic, Archie Comics Metal Sonic, Emerald, Gamma. It's a story of them going from bad to good, and rebelling against their purpose. Shadow had the exact same development! Shadow's purpose was to avenge Maria and the Ark researchers, which Gerald stated himself in the diary entry. He was a villain who was eventually taught the meaning of life, and he died to protect those he once tried to hurt. So, looking back at Gamma, who had a very similar character arc, would it be right for Sega to bring him back? No. Fans are upset that he died, but if he was brought back, then that death wouldn't upset anybody ever again, and he would likely become a very boring character. He'd feel like he was lingering in the plot for far too long, much like Shadow. Again, Shadow's a cool character, but it does feel like he's overstayed his welcome. He's no longer relevant, and is often used only to rival Sonic. But Sonic should be rivaled by characters like Metal Sonic, who have only one goal: beat Sonic. Shadow's goal was never to beat Sonic at anything. He only fought Sonic because he was getting in the way of his plan, and he even seemed to show some respect for him. So, in conclusion to this rant, Shadow isn't one of my top favourite characters because I feel like he's really been ruined. He's lingered in the franchise for far too long, and is only thrown in for fan service, which is funny because Sega won't bring characters like Mephiles back despite fans begging for his return. I want Shadow's actual death to be retconned somehow, if he is going to stay in the franchise. Seriously, There is nothing which actually talks about how he survived falling to Earth. Like Sega. Just say that he chaos controlled with the last of his strength and that he was found by Eggman. Or maybe even Metal Sonic, since he was the antagonist of Shadow's next game, Sonic Heroes. Anything. Just stop brushing his actual story under the rug and address it. He could even become relevant again. Character arcs like the one from Sonic 06 are what we need, not character arcs like the one from Sonic Forces. And rant over. This has been Lord Danny, signing out.